Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video from Average FPL. Just before we get into it, any likes and subscribes on the channel, greatly appreciated. Really appreciate any support. And thank you to those that have been supporting so far. Hopefully we can keep it going. So what we're going to do, we're going to rate your teams again. So I did a previous video looking at three separate teams that had been sent in. So check that one out if you haven't seen it already. And what we're going to do today is just rate three more. So team number one is in front of us here, and what a team we've got. To be fair, it's quite top heavy in terms of you've got a few big hitters in there, and the bench is quite thin. You've only really got Anderson from there that's going to play certain any minutes, but and your starting 11 is very strong. So you've got double Man City, double Arsenal, double Chelsea, double Spurs, or triple Man City, even with Edison in goal. So what we've got is that Man City links, fantastic. Um, I would say Cancelo, De Bruyne, Edison. They're three of the more nailed on Man City players that you can get, which is good because if you've got a thin bench, then you're going to be relying on these players in your starting 11 to be starting all the time. James at right back, fair enough. I think if you're going to get a Chelsea player, same with Mount, although I maybe would be a bit concerned about rotations with Mount, but I do think that he is more one of the more nailed on players for Chelsea. Janssen's there probably just to make up the numbers. Um, and I think Dyer and Son, as well as Ward, Prowse, Saka, and Jesus, they're all pretty much nailed on. So, in terms of your thin bench, I don't think you really need to worry about that. I think with these teams and choosing your teams, especially early on, if you're planning on wildcarding in 1 or 2 game weeks into the season, don't worry about your bench. I think if you've got your team for the long term, and you don't want to make your wild card just yet, I think having a bit of a deeper bench is probably better if you're not too sure of how many minutes players are gonna play. I think we've all got that vision in our heads of Cancelo is gonna play, but sometimes it doesn't always work out like that. So it is important to have a sort of plan B if things don't work out. Where can you go? With the big hitters, it's not a bigger problem because you can usually just scale down the price list of other players and get them in. But in terms of this team overall, I think it's pretty good. I like the Arsenal in there. I like the Spurs in there. I think Ward Prowse is always going to play and a very underrated player. He's always good for a free kick or a penalty. And I think for that price that he's at, I think why not? So team number two is much more well-rounded looking at it here. I think the goalkeeper with Henderson, I said it in a previous video, I would probably have goalkeepers as your last pick in your team. I think, like the difference in points is so minimal. And as long as they're going to play, they're pretty much going to get, give or take, the same amount of points. Someone like Edison or Allison might get more clean sheets, but they're going to make fewer saves. And, teams that like Burnley in the past, they concede a lot of shots, but they concede a lot of long distance shots. So those goalkeepers are more likely to make those saves. So I think that's something just worthwhile, just leaving your goalkeeper just to the last pick of your draft and seeing how much you've got left, as long as you've got enough for a playing keeper, and then just going with whoever you prefer. But to be honest, you're splitting hairs. If you're going with a keeper in one of the top teams, it's also about, do you want to limit your outfield choices? By taking an Alisson or an Edison, it means you can only have two outfield players from Liverpool and Man City. So if that's fine for you, then go for it. I had Edison in quite a bit last season, and he did get points, but it was always 6 points, 6 points, 6 points, which you'll take, but there was never really much chance for bonus or saves. Going into the defence, this guy's got Cancelo again. Also got Van Dijk, interesting, not Trent or Robbo. Now, I think Van Dijk, 6.5 million. Robertson is 7 and Trent is 7.5. But the point difference, especially between Robertson and Van Dijk, was very small. And if you want to save zero point 0.5 million in there, you know Van Dijk's going to play. He's probably going to be the last player rotated out of that defence, you would think. Um, so I think that's a good shout. Ben White at 4.5 million. Again, coming off of injury, if he plays, fantastic. I think that's great value. And same with Soyuncu, coming off of injury, but he is the mainstay in Leicester's defence, and they looked a lot worse without him, especially towards the end of last season. So I think if he and Ben White are fit, great value choices. Going into midfield, Son, Saka, and Diaz. I think now Mane's gone. They've obviously got a couple of extra players, including Nunes. Um, of Liverpool in the attack. But I think Luis Diaz really is a sort of staked a claim for that starting position based on his form towards the end of last season. I think especially in the FA Cup, he looked electric and so passes the eye test. Is a bit of a gamble pick, especially at the start of the season. We don't know how Liverpool are going to line up. But in my opinion, if you were going to pick, him or one of the new starters, I think you would go with him. Saka and Jesus we spoke about previously. I think they're great additions. I really like Jesus this season, especially to start with. I think he's a good price point. And in previous years, that 8-9 million pound striker hasn't really been good value. I think Jesus at 8 million. I think he's worth upgrading from a 7.5, even a 6.5 million striker because I'm sure he's guaranteed starts. He's not going to move to Arsenal, play for Arteta, and when they're negotiating the contract, they'll have things in there that he's going to play. He's not going to move from Man City's bench to Arsenal's bench, and I think he's got a lot to prove. Son speaks for himself. I think Antonio and Tony up front are really good mid-price players you could get in. Like I said at the start, this team is really well rounded, and you've got a full playing bench as well, apart from the keeper. But I think Kulusevski, Lingard, and Anderson on your bench, I think are great options. And to be honest, this is the best team I've seen in both videos. I just think it gives you that flexibility, especially early on when you're not too sure who's going to be playing where, just to have a little bit of a mess around with your team and choose what goes best for you and react to different situations. So the third and final team we've got here is wow, that midfield that is pretty full on, to be honest. That I think you've gone all in there. I think, having Salah, Son, Sterling, Fernandez, and Madison, nobody below 8 million there. Four players, 10 or above. I think that is a huge amount of transfer funds in that midfield. And if you've got the guts to go for it, pal, hey, you know what? This is a sort of team I'd be really interested to see how it goes. I kind of wish, you know, I'd have another team to experiment with that and see how it went. I think it'd be really interesting to see how a team like this does, where you go all in on a few players, because if they are all capable of scoring points, and I think Sterling at Chelsea will be really interesting. Again, he won't have, just like Jesus in the previous team. Sterling won't have left Man City to get less minutes at Chelsea. He'll be going to try and be the main guy. It'd be really interesting to see how it goes there. And same with Fernandez. A bit of a down season last season. He'll be wanting to bounce back. Apart from the midfield, I think the defence, all 4.5 million players by the look of it, all playing. They're all going to play. So, I mean, that is something. And play for teams, like Palace, Brighton, Arsenal. Would be hoping to keep a few clean sheets. Ben Mee at Brentford. Again, he will play Brentford with that second season in the Premier League. A lot of times, teams they fall off. So it's good they've added that experience in, although he did have experience of getting relegated last season. But hopefully he can sturdy that defence up a bit. Ramsdale in goal, double Arsenal defence. Don't know how I feel about that. I think maybe look at swapping out either Ben White or Ramsdale for somebody different just early on, just to balance it out. I think having double defence at the start of the season is a bit risky. Obviously, it could pay off, and if it does, you're going to get double the rewards. But I think the other goalkeepers are just as likely to score points as well, and you minimise that risk. Up front, Chris Woods guaranteed 10 goals a season, good price. Obviously, cheaper striker that you could get, so you could get in that midfield. My main concern is the bench. You've got one Crystal Palace defender. Obviously, you can make transfers if someone gets injured, and having a lot of big hitters in there does mean, you can easily move off Salah, Son, Sterling, or Fernandes and get save 2 or 3 million there on a cheaper midfielder and upgrade, your 4.5 million strikers to a Antonio or a Tony or something like that, and then you just gives your team a bit more depth. So I maybe look at doing that. If you want to see how it goes, then fair enough. I think go for it, and but that's maybe a way out early on. I think having 4.5 million defenders really does sort of restrict your flexibility in defense. You need to get rid of a big hitter in order to upgrade it. So if any of those four teams that you've got in defense start poorly, you're kind of stuck, and you'd need to get rid of a midfielder in order to upgrade your defense. But if you want to take the gamble, fair play to you, I respect it. Um, so yeah, that's the three teams we're going to review today. Let me know what you think. Which team do you think was the best? What changes would you make on any of these teams? And if you've got any questions, just let me know in the comments section. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Any likes and subscribes, greatly appreciated, and I will see you in the next one.